Hello doll friends, this is Michael Canadas with the Grovian Doll Museum and Carmel Doll Shop. Today we are going to go to the happiest place on earth. We have a guest speaker, Susan Foreman, who's going to come in. Come on in, Susan. Susan is our go-to expert on all things unique and unusual. But I think that what we're going to look at today, everyone all over the world knows about these characters that are actually dolls.
They are actually dolls.
They're actually dolls. They were marketed as dolls, and these are the masterworks of Charlotte Clark. So, Susan, where do we begin?
Well, actually, we begin with the mouse.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So we're going to begin with the mouse.
Okay, and actually that was a quote in 1954 that Walt Disney used when he was describing his Disney empire, and said, we must remember it all began with the mouse. And the mouse, of course, was Mickey Mouse. And it would have been when Steamboat Willie came out, which was the first cartoon with synchronized sound, and it became all the rage. Everybody fell in love with Mickey. He had actually been in 2 cartoons prior to, but those were not well received. So it was when they started doing sound with it. At that time, Roy and Walt were struggling. Money was very limited. And in order to distribute cartoons or films, it was all back in New York. So Walt went back to New York to set up a distribution line for the cartoons. And I'm going to read this quote. This was back in 1929 when he went to New York. And this actually comes from a book that was written by a friend of mine that was the archivist for Disney for 25 years. Robert recently retired, but he's written several excellent books on Disney. And so this talks about the idea for merchandise tie-ins. So to quote Walt, he said, quote, "A fellow who kept hanging around the hotel waving $300 at me and saying that he wanted to put the mouse on the paper tablets children use in school. As usual, Roy and I needed money, so I took the $300. And this also gave them the idea about this merchandise tie-in. And of course, one of the ideal tie-ins would be a Mickey Mouse doll. And my first introduction to the Charlotte Clark dolls is actually this little guy here. This poor, remended, much-loved Mickey was my late husband's first toy. He was born 2 months after Mickey was debuted in Steamboat Willie. And in 1931, his mother bought him this mouse. And she always had told him it was a Charlotte Clark. And she even claimed that she knew Charlotte Clark. Whether that's true, unfortunately with family stories, you don't think until it's too late to ask further questions.
But Susan, California was little then.
It was,
She
and so
probably
she
did.
probably, I think she probably did.
It was a small town.
It was, and these were sold at Bullock's and May Company. She may have bought them there. Her husband, which would have been my father-in-law, had a jewelry store in the Oviatt building in downtown LA, which was 1 block from Bullock's. So it could have been purchased there. Or it could be, it's hard to know. It's been mended so many times. It does have a little spot here where it could have been a stife, actually, where a button could have been. In any event, my husband loved this mouse. He had it on the dash of his first car. He actually claims he took it to Korea in his Army duffel bag in 1953. And so this really started my interest.
He's been really loved.
Oh, he is so loved. And now I have him under a dome. I protect him. So anyway, that was my introduction to Charlotte Clark. So like Disney, which said it all started with the mouse, for me, it all started with the mouse. And likewise for Charlotte Clark, it all started with a mouse. Charlotte Clark was quite an entrepreneur. She was born in Indianapolis. Her name at the time of birth was Carolyn. I don't know when she became Charlotte. But in any event, she married Frank Clark in the late 1890s. And at the turn of the century, they moved out to Los Angeles. I know nothing about her husband. I've never been able to find out if they moved here because of his work. I don't know. He's never mentioned in any of the biographies about Charlotte. But she, in order to make money, started doing home-baked goods, home crafts, and delivered them and sold them to various grocery stores and shops in the Hollywood area. And then, like everybody else, when Mickey Mouse made his debut, she said, oh my gosh, she was a great seamstress as well. I need to make a doll, a Mickey Mouse doll. It's gotta be. So she turned to her young nephew, who was just 14, Bob Clampett, and he was an exceptional artist even at that early age. And she asked him to do some sketches of Mickey. So he went to the Fox Theater in Glendale. Ironically, when I was growing up, I used to go to the Fox Theater in Glendale because I grew up in Burbank, only a few blocks from the Disney studio. So it always seems like Disney keeps coming to me. In any event, he sat through 3 showings of Steamboat Willie, and lo and behold, Mickey appeared on his sketch pad. From that, he and his aunt designed the first pattern and started making Mickey dolls. Now, his father, Bob Clampett's father, realized that Mickey was a trademarked item, so they needed to get permission. He drove Charlotte and his son and the prototype mouse to Disney, and Roy and Walt loved the doll, absolutely. The quality was exceptional, and this would be an example of the Charlotte Clark Mickey.
Could you pull him out so they can see how adorable he is?
In fact, the Roy and Walt were so taken with this mouse that she created that they actually built a studio for her right behind their studio on Hyperion in Los Angeles, and they called it the Dollhouse. And so she, along with Bob Clampett, who did the stuffing, she paid him 30 cents per doll to stuff the dolls. His father became the salesman, and then she had 6 seamstresses working with her, and they were turning out around 300 to 400 Mickeys a week. And originally, Walt and Roy used them for gifts, for promotional items, for friends, that kind of thing, and did not market them. However, then there was a picture in some of the movie magazines of Walt with a Charlotte Clark Mickey. Well, everybody...
Can you show us that? Because I think you've got that.
Yeah, I do. Everybody wanted to
Because
have...
it's such a great image.
have a Mickey. And this is a picture of Walt with the Charlotte Clarks. This is actually a little later picture and not the one that was in those magazines, because in this, if you look at it really close, I love this because most people overlook this when they look at this picture. These are all Charlotte Clark, with the exception of one mouse in there.
Oh,
that,
I see it now. Mm-hmm.
Down here. Mm-hmm. That was one that the Disneys could not stand, the Dean's rag doll. But
so they did not like that one.
They did not, but I'll get to that part of the story. But in any event, there's a Dean's, but the rest are Charlotte Clark.
What's really fabulous about this is most of us are used to seeing the middle-aged Walt Disney, and here he's just a young guy.
Oh, yeah, and he was, they had quite a team because he was the innovative, artistic part of it, and then, of course, Roy was the businessman. So in any event, once these pictures appeared, everybody wanted a mouse. And so at that time, they had the licensing for a lot of the merchandise that they were proposing with Borgfeld back in New York. So their ideal, I thought, was to go to Borgfeld and see if Borgfeld could produce dolls of the quality that they've desired. So Borgfeld submitted a couple of examples, and I have a letter here. First of all, I forgot to mention that the first item that really Borgfeld did distribute with their name was this little wooden Mickey that was made by Funny Flex Company, and this was one of the early Borgfeld toys.
And is this American made?
Yes, And so these are just little wooden Mickeys.
Oh, I'm sure those are popular.
Yeah. And I saw one on the internet recently. It was like, around $450 or so.
Wow, for a little,
with the ears, because most of them don't have their ears anymore.
I would imagine that would be the first to get
But in any
off.
event, so that was Borgfeld, one of their first toys. However, Borgfeld and Disney did not have a good rapport. And I'm going to read a couple of letters just to give you an idea of the atmosphere at the time. So they had sent examples of the Charlotte Clark to Borgfeld to find a producer. And Borgfeld then said they would send them some samples. So here's the letters from Roy to Borgfeld. Walt and I are both very much put out regarding your continued delay in getting into proper production and distribution of these dolls. You have been talking a great deal and doing nothing.
Uh-oh.
Well, this did not set a good rapport. So then Roy's comment that on April 1st, that letter was February 25th of 1931. On April 1st, Roy's comment upon receiving 2 small-sized samples from Borgfeld, quote, "We are very disappointed. They look even worse than the large one, and I want you to know that we do not like them and do not want you to manufacture and put on the market these dolls if they are going to look like these samples." So you can see that things were not going smoothly. In the meantime, Dean's Ragdoll Company in England produced a Mickey Mouse through the auspices of Mickey's representative in England. And the doll that they made, that Dean's made, absolutely the Disneys hated it. I mean, they really didn't like it, and they prevented it from being imported. There's an example of my Dean's, and I mean, I think it's quite fun, but Roy and Walt thought it had like a sneer, especially with the open mouth and the teeth, and they just really did not like. But I just think it's.
But I think compared to the Charlotte Clark's, Charlotte's is very pleasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
So as from an adult point of view, this has got character, but for a child, it might be a little intimidating.
But Susan, don't you think though, in the early Mickeys, he was a little bit of a sneery little.
Oh, he was. They softened him up over the years. Mickey's changed about 3 times, and a lot of their characters did. When they first started, they had real attitudes. And they've softened Mickey up, because originally, it was like a rat that became famous and he became a mouse, because he had kind of
When did his girlfriend Minnie come into the picture?
Oh, Minnie was in Steamboat Willie. But as far as Charlotte Clark, she started producing minis in 1931. Mickey was 1930.
So it was close. They were
It was shortly after, really, that Mickey became famous. In spite of the Disney's dissatisfaction with Borgfeld did go behind their back and actually purchase Mickey's directly from Charlotte Clark. And they also, at that time, set up distribution and production with Steiff. And even though the Steiff dolls were very, very almost identical, really, to the Charlotte Clark, the Disneys were so upset with Borgfeld that they just didn't want anything to do with him at all. But this is an example, it's only a 6-inch tall one that I had, of the Stife with the little button in the ear and his little
It's
tag.
really just a total copy of Charlotte
Oh,
Clark's.
very much
Yeah.
so. It really is.
I mean, the materials are different, but
Well, it's still got the velvet material,
Yeah.
you know.
but if you put it right next to, I think you realize that they had a sample and they took it apart and patterned it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, maybe made 5% changes, which is what they probably need to do
So in the
to not
meantime,
get sued.
Borgfeld was promoting the velvet dolls, as they called them. And here's this is from 1931. It's an ad for the Borgfeld line of Mickey Mouses. And you can see here where the Mickey is referred to as a velvet doll. I have it enlarged if you want an enlarged picture. If it didn't stick together. So there we go.
Oh, yeah.
So it was referred to as a velvet doll
So Borgfeld were getting those from
Charlotte Clark.
Okay.
They also, at the same time, they were distributing ones from the producer that the Disneys did not approve of poorer quality. Those were being sold. And Stife was also in the picture. So oftentimes you'd find in a department store you could have all three. In fact, one of the last letters that Roy wrote to Borgfeld before they had a complete severing of the ways, if you will, and I'll read this one, was October 30th, 1931, Roy writes to Borgfeld. I was in Bullock's Los Angeles store. Oh, and I have to interject. My office in downtown LA, where my husband and I had our watch repair shop, I was directly across from Bullock's. And so for 30 years, I looked out at Bullock's. So when I read this, it's like, oh my gosh, it takes me back to 7th and Hill Street. Anyway, I digress. So, quote, I was in Bullock's Los Angeles store recently in the toy department and had an opportunity to see, for the first time, a complete display of the various models of stuffed Mickey Mouse dolls, which Borgfeld is now handling. I must confess that I am very disappointed. I think the workmanship and general appearance of all the dolls is nothing short of terrible. The buyer at Bullock's has called the studio on at least 2 occasions, attempting to purchase dolls from us directly because of the inferiority of Borgfeld's dolls. Walt had the opportunity of seeing the display of Borgfeld Mickey Mouse toys and novelties in the Biltmore Hotel. Walt was not disappointed. He was positively disgusted with the majority of the merchandise. Please take this letter seriously and in the spirit in which it is intended, and try to improve the quality of your Mickey Mouse merchandise, particularly the Mickey Mouse stuffed dolls. So this is really when Walt and Roy decided the best approach to creating more dolls or making more dolls available was to issue a pattern. So in 1932, McCall's came out with pattern number 31, which enabled the home seamstress to create Mickey or Minnie. And I have looked for years, on eBay and all for an original example. There are people that sell copies, but I've not found an original. So this is a scan I took off of a photo I had.
So this is what they would approve.
This, they approved of having the home seamstresses could make it with, they couldn't sell it. Well, they weren't supposed to sell it, but, it was during the Depression. We have to remember that. And so, yes.
It gave people an opportunity to have a doll if they couldn't afford to.
In fact, it's interesting thinking about that in hindsight is about, this was a Depression era, and the fact that so many people wanted to buy a Mickey Mouse toy. It's very much like, the Shirley Temple doll. Mickey saved so many companies. They saved Lionel Train, who got a licensing to do Mickey train cars. They saved the Ingersoll Watch Company from bankruptcy because of the Mickey Mouse watch. I mean, so it was quite remarkable how entertainment during a time of depression people will pay for. And this is a perfect example of it. So in any event, in 1932 is when they came out with the pattern. They still needed to do something as far as marketing with their other merchandise. And as you can tell, Borgfeld and Disney's were never going to get along. So at that point, a super salesman, his name was Herbert K. Kamen, contacted Disney. And he was a marketing, merchandising genius. He really was. And also a really nice guy, which is probably why he was a great salesman. And Walt and Roy took an instant liking to him, all his ideas on how to promote the company. So they signed a deal with him to make him the merchandising manager, if you will. Now, we still had Borgfeld in the picture, and they would be for another year or so. But Borgfeld had to answer to K. Kamen, which, of course, then the relationship with Borgfeld deteriorated even more. I mean, it was just... but then by late 32, 33, the licensing with Borgfeld was coming to an end, and K. Kamen was given permission to be the licensee. He is the one that was responsible for going to Knickerbocker. And in 1934, Knickerbocker started producing the Mickey Mouse dolls, and of the quality that Walt and Roy demanded. And also, interesting enough, now Charlotte Clark, I know this is about Charlotte Clark, she was still making dolls, but she also worked for Knickerbocker and designed the dolls that they would be producing. And Knickerbocker produced the Mickeys up until World War II. Then after World War II, it was the Gund Manufacturing Company that did the Mickeys and other characters. And Charlotte Clark also worked with them as a designer. So Charlotte Clark really, she was the one that was behind all of these characters. Her prototype Pinocchio she did in 1939. And, you know, Bongo the bear over here, we'll get to him. He was, 1947, so he would have been by Gund after the war. But she was involved with Disney's for over 30 years when you think about it. And she was responsible for all the different characters for their designs. I mean, just an amazing woman. She passed away in 1960, so she worked actually up until 1958 with Gund. So that was from, say, 1930, 1929, up to 1958. But it's a wonderful story of, American ingenuity, if you will, and creativity, and just the impact that a little mouse could have on the world. Everybody knows Mickey. I mean, he is probably, to this day, one of the most famous icons. And you can't help but smile when you look at these characters. And look at Bongo with his girlfriend.
So, Susan, could you show us, I believe that these are some of the what are on this display right now, some of the earliest three-dimensional soft toys of these characters. So could you just, and some of them look to me like Looney Tunes, that they may not be.
That's the thing that I question. Obviously, Bongo and Lulabelle, those were Disney movies that came out after the war. And so those.
And what would you date these to?
1947.
Okay.
And this, of course, was based on the Sinclair Lewis story of Bongo the Circus Bear. Of course, Dumbo, I don't remember when Dumbo cartoon came out.
I think it was 1940. Could it be?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I always loved Dumbo, but I know Pinocchio came out in 39. So some of the, and then the other thing I was going to point out, the influence that Charlotte Clark continued to have And I know I always have to get watches or clocks into the story, but forgive me, it's been 50 years of being in the clock and watch business. But there are a couple of watch companies that created commemorative watches to the Charlotte Clark. And this is one that Fossil Watch Company did in 1995. And they actually created a little mouse that was from the original pattern of the Charlotte Clark, the McCall's pattern number 91. And the dial of the watch has a picture, that famous picture of Disney with all the mice. And, so this was a limited edition of 5,000. The other one, I'm wearing it today. This was done in 1998, which would have been Mickey's 70th birthday. And this was actually done by Disney itself. And this was a limited edition of 1,000. So it just shows you that still in the 90s, people were, talking about the Charlotte Clark Mickey Mouse. And that was how important it was to merchandising. It's a really wonderful story. But I do like the Woody Woodpecker and what looks like Bugs Bunny. It's interesting because Bob Clampett, who was the nephew that designed, did the first drawings, he ended up working for Warner Brothers and was an award-winning animator, and he was the first one to draw Bugs Bunny. So I don't know if that could be why we have a Bugs Bunny, because almost everything I read about with Charlotte Clark was Disney. But
well,
yet,
she could have had a side hustle.
See, that's what I'm thinking because of her nephew that did Bugs Bunny. He also did Beanie and Cecil, and he did a number of different cartoons. And then, of course,
tell me about this
duck.
This girl duck.
Attitude.
I mean, look at her heels and the way she stands.
Oh, and look at her eyes. Oh, I mean, she's got attitude. I think she and Donald have been, I don't know.
I think she could work a stripper pole.
Oh, yeah. No, I wish she could speak, and there's more going on here.
And then we've got Jiminy Cricket. Is that who that is?
Yeah, and Figaro, the cat from Pinocchio.
And those are fairly early too, aren't they?
Yeah.
I believe that this Pinocchio may be a prototype.
Probably, yeah. I happen to have one in my collection as well, and doesn't have the marking on the bottom of the foot, but it probably is. They are wonderful. I mean, when you look at the detail and everything.
And then we have, I think we don't see these every day, the mice from Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
And they captured those pretty well.
They did an excellent job with the mice.
And we have a very interesting photograph here to show them.
Yeah, that is Charlotte's nephew and his wife. I believe it's the wife. And she gave them gifts oftentimes of some of her creations and her designs. And so that's just, wouldn't you love to have the goofy and, some of those are just wonderful. Because those are before they've been much loved or moth-eaten or anything.
That was a nice little pile if that was indeed a gift. Well, Susan, thank you for sharing all the information about Charlotte Clark. And I do think this is just an amazing part of our Americana. Don't you agree?
I agree. And it is. It's really, you can't help but not smile. And it takes you back to a more innocent time frame, just with these characters.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope everyone out there on World Doll Day enjoys this little teaser into the wonderful world, I can't say it, wonderful world of Disney.
Very good.
So we have some people in the studio audience, and I think we should tune out by doing the song. Is everybody ready?
I can't even lip sync in tune, so I will have
We'll
to
all do it. Everybody do it loud. MICKEYMOUSC. Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.